Welcome to the Nonprofits. In our second segment this week, we continue our examination of the U.S. government's cancellation of grants already earmarked to support projects of inclusion. Jonathan Roudabush, these stories are becoming too common, but it is still very important that we break out the magnifying glass and examine them. So what are the details here?
Well, dodgy Dodge strikes again. In the new administration, in their efforts to erase anything not white heteronormative in government with the excuse of creating a meritocracy where only your personal accomplishment matters, any minority is not allowed to be shown as meriting anything, is the result. So, and primarily racist, transphobic, and homophobic, denying minority and divergent people the credit and for the accomplishments they deserve. So, as a result, it is an attempt to make all non-privileged citizens invisible to the white heteronormative Christian minority. So they canceled an Ohio grant to place historical markers and these historical markers include famous LGBTQ sites. So this is a little personal for me, but this was part of the cancellation of $25 million in grants. The Ohio History Connection received 249,810 of the federal grants in 2022. One marker for where Ohio's first and longest running lesbian bar once stood, it's since been demolished, was not paid from this grant. There was a historic group that paid for that. And this is another shameful attempt to erase our history and our lives. They will ultimately fail. We're still here and we're still alive, and we know what we had as history. But until then, who knows? Story is from Central Ohio News by David Rees, published April 8th, 2025.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. So these cuts were made in the name of, quote, government efficiency. As a member of the LGBTQ community yourself, as you mentioned earlier, I imagine you take that quite personally, that, having part of your history removed as government efficiency. So how do you feel about having those contributions of this community just being cast aside? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's something we've been suffering from since I was a child, and long before that. Society has never accepted LGBTQ plus people, as human beings. They've always tried to demonize, tell us that we're things that we're not, define us for ourselves, all the nasty, ugly things you do to people. When you just want to make them go away, you think they're icky or something like that. And your culture is what does that. And when the culture started changing to accept us, there's a large part of that culture who is trying to say, no, you can't do that. This is how my identity, this is me, and we're saying, yeah, but we're here too. We're a me too, so get your act together, get over it, and move on with your life. So we're moving on with ours, regardless of what you do or say. You stand in my way, I'll walk over you. We're not going away. We're not going back in the closet. So that's my opinion anyway.
Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Eli, I want to ask you specific about the article. It mentions that of the over 1,800 historical markers in Ohio, only 3 of them laud contributions of the LGBT community. 3 out of 1,800. I think we all know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is this really a matter of government efficiency, quote unquote?
I mean, they're saying it's about budget consciousness, but I think there's a good reason to believe that that's not the case. I think it's cultural warfare, for all of the reasons that Jonathan described, and you'll always hear people say, like, one of the I don't know if it's most common, but there's always this idea of like, I'm fine with whatever people want to be as long as they don't shove it down my throat. And then when you ask for an example of like, okay, well, what do you mean when you say shoving it down your throat? It's something like this. It's like, well, why do there have to be monuments for gay and trans people? Why can't they just be monuments for people? And it's this idea that like, that identity, having uniqueness and having identity and individuality is like just not something that's worth acknowledging.
Right.
When you I had a thought and I had it put in a certain way, that when you don't acknowledge their existence, you participate in their erasure. And that's
an excellent point. Say that again, please.
Yeah, when you don't acknowledge their existence in history, their contributions, you're participating in their erasure. And what that means is that gay kids and trans kids and all types of kids, all kinds of kids from everywhere deserve to see that people just like them have always existed, have always contributed, have always mattered and participated, and that there's no one particular way that you have to be. You're allowed to be an individual. You're allowed to have an identity, and there's nothing wrong with whatever that identity is. And history is not the way. When you take out identity, the default view of history is that it's just filled with a bunch of white men fueled by guns and by God and gunpowder.
Right.
And that's just not consistent with reality.
Right. I want to stick with you, Eli. So, building on what you were just talking about. So these were historical markers that were canceled. So they're really just tearing pages out of the history book, basically. Why would the inclusion of a marginalized segment of the population be important in a historical context?
Well, and partly for kind of how I was describing, kids deserve to see that, like, there's all kinds of individuality, but also there was like a statement made by, one of the individuals involved in canceling this. It's like, we don't fund identity politics. And it's that identity shouldn't be political. Like, there's no one event in, I think, human history, I might be justified in saying, that only involved exclusively one demographic of people and no other people. And so, like, you think of like all, wars, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, 9/11, like, the COVID pandemic, all these things have always involved all types of different demographics of people. And when it just, like, kind of how I was saying before, if you don't have, if you don't acknowledge their existence, you're just erasing their existence. And you don't have to be a part of a demographic of people that Harry and Tubman, benefited, in order to acknowledge the benefit of her contributions and the work and the effort that she put in.
Right.
So there's value in celebrating there are things that make, people different from each other, and those things are great and fine to celebrate and not be ashamed of and not hide from and not, put away and erase from history. And it's I don't know. I can't put it.
It's almost like before you were saying, why do we need to celebrate specific categories of people? Why don't we just celebrate people? Well, what they're doing is they're eliminating those separate categories. And so they're actually saying that, while at the same time they're arguing to actually not just celebrate people. We talked before about how 3 out of the 1,800 historical markers were related to LGBTQ people, and that's way less than the percentage of the population that would fall into that group.
We're part of history,
right?
So if we don't have LGBTQ, if we don't have Black, Hispanic, Asian people designated in our history, they are in our history. You're just trying to rewrite history.
Right.
You're not concerned about history. And this budget excuse is the one that conservatives have used for time immemorial to pass discriminatory legislation. And that's what has happened here as well. They're just, and the thing is, the people who are doing it do not have the authority to do that.
Right.
Congress passed these dollars to go to that place. It's Congress's job to control the purse strings. The administration does not have the right or the authority to change what Congress said. So it's, it just drives me insane that they think they can just go in and we're just going to take a hatchet to the budget. No, you do that in Congress. You don't do that. You don't get to do that as an administrator.
Sorry, go ahead, Eli, if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, that's not an Oval Office, activity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Jonathan, something that you said at the beginning of your last little bit there really stood out to me. You said, we are part of history. And I would go beyond that. And I would say, we are also all part of we. It's not that you're part of history or you're not part of history. We're all part of us. And so if we're talking about our history, we're talking about our society, we need to include we. I mean, it all depends on it boils down to that, that nasty word, inclusiveness, right? Do we want to include all these people or do we want to exclude them and make them into a them, right? And so if we can make a them into a them and then keep our we small, in more ways than one, I suppose.
We can blame them for all our problems, and we won't have to take credit for what we do wrong. We won't have to be responsible for the fact that we have just managed to rip off the majority of people by blaming a minority of the people for doing it.
Right.
And that's just what's happening. It's a deflection. It's really sad that we fall for that every single year at budget time.
Yeah. Jonathan, I want to stick with you for a second. I'm a cisgendered heterosexual white man. I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community. Yeah, well, none of us are perfect, right? But there are many people that I care about, including people on this panel that are important to me, and so that are part of that community. And so what could I do to help validate this existence, validate the contributions of the others that are being cast aside by things like this? What kind of advice would you give to me? What can I do to help?
Being a good ally, it means a lot of things. One is, first, just recognizing the people in your life that are of LGBTQ. The other is getting acquainted with our history. That's something that even LGBTQ plus people should do. It's not a pretty history, but it is a history, and it needs to be out there. And if you see somebody, or if somebody's telling an off-color joke or something like that, speak up. That's all an ally can do. The rest of us have to be there to show them that we're human beings. You can't do that for us. We have to do that. But you can say, that's not cool, dude. That's just not cool. And when they say, well, what are you? You can say, it's none of your business.
Right.
What it is that what you're doing is you're putting people down that you don't even know.
Right.
Or however you want to do it, or whatever your idea is. Eli tends to come up with some pretty good ways of phrasing things like that are kind of get attention. But I'm not a poet, so I can't. I use brute force a lot of the time. Like what the language I would use probably shouldn't be broadcast.
Well, you are a sailor, right? You're a sailor.
Yeah,
so
that's what I mean. You don't want to hear it.
Okay. All right. So speaking of Eli, I wanted to jump over to Eli real quick here. So author Michael P. Watson says that, quote, strong people don't put others down, they lift them up. And so how could that reflect on the situation here? What kind of light do you think that statements like that cast onto what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wholly agree with that. I don't know if I find any flaw in that idea. And when you take a look at what this this particular budget cut or, actions like this are doing that are pretty clearly just targeting a group of already marginalized people. How is that lifting anybody up? What is, and it's not only not lifting up that group, it's not really lifting up anybody. It's not helping anyone at all to not have these markers in place. I mean, you could, I guess, make the argument, well, now that money can go somewhere else. Like, you think that's going to do something good for you?
Well, what about the other, 1,797 historical markers too? That money could have gone to something else too.
True.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I don't mean because of like the small amount that these three, structures would have cost, but I mean, like, I think that there's a lot of discussion around government spending going on. And I'm just not of the opinion that it is going to become any more transparent than it ever has been. Right. And I think there's a strong case to be made that probably less so. Right. So I just don't think that those funds that would have otherwise gone to celebrating people that have done great things for others in their community and their society, that's what that money would have gone to. It would have celebrated those people. And now it's going to go to, question mark. Right. So.
I have one last question I want to ask both of you. I'll ask Eli first because I want to give Jonathan the last word here. But and the same question for both of you. Can the harm that is being caused by this and other similar recent events, can this harm ever be healed?
I am not a part of the group to whom the harm is being done. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, I don't know if it is my place to comment on that. I don't know if I could accurately make a judgment about that, because I think that's up to the ones that are being harmed.
Okay, fair enough. Jonathan, what are your thoughts then? Can this real damage that's being done to an important community in our society, can this ever be healed? I mean, is this something that we can put behind us, or are we doomed as a species and as a civilization and as a nation to forever, to ever be shitting on other people, I guess?
Well, I would say that all harm can be dealt with and can be in the past. Mm-hmm. The repercussions of it will resonate through at least several generations. Eventually, it will just be a footnote in a history book someplace. That's okay. But the real harm and pain it causes now, they're real people. And I don't think that people really understand that everybody who is in a minority situation anywhere in the world are real human beings. They could be your sister, and oftentimes are. If you own a uterus in this society, they're trying to put you back in the kitchen. And that's all that they want you to do, because you threaten men when you're better at their job than they are. And that's the same with all minorities. But the only thing you can do is be who you are and be the best that you can be, and do it publicly so that people understand that you're human and you're a good human and you're doing good things for them as well. And I think that'll turn the tide eventually. I find that people who were pretty bigoted that I got to know and talk to on a daily basis, when they found out I was queer, they all of a sudden changed their mind on that. Well, they can't be that bad, because here's John, and he lives a very quiet life, and he works hard and he does his stuff. That's what we do as LGBTQ plus, as right. Other minorities do. But the one last comment I want to make about the whole thing is that the opposition to us always uses the budget while they are blowing the budget up with financial giveaways to their very wealthy friends. Right. We're targeting the wrong people. You want to get a better society, target the people who are ripping you off, essentially. So I'm going to stop there, because I don't want to get too involved in that, but just a thought.
Sure. So I just want to clarify, did I detect a hint of optimism in what you were saying there?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's great news.
I'm old enough to where I might not see it, but I have optimism that people are people, and they basically are good. They don't like being angry and mad.
Okay.
So I think that eventually that will wear off, and we'll get together and at least not be trying to beat each other up every day. Maybe every other
hearing
day.
that from you, Jonathan, it does make, because I know many of us have difficulty these days finding room for optimism. And so I'm glad to hear that, that there is some of that out there. So thank you for sharing. I thank both of you, actually. And if any of you watching want to find out more about our thoughts on these topics, then just click one of these links.